So good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to the final mini medical school of 2021. Boy, where did March and April go? My name is Zoe Burrow. I'm a first-year medical student at the IU School of Medicine here in Terre Haute, and I'll be your moderator for the session tonight. As you can see, the format's a little bit different this year. If you haven't been with us before, we're holding it over Zoom, but we're so happy to have you here with us tonight virtually. Before I introduce our panelists for this evening, I'd just like to take a moment to give a big thank you to the sponsors who have made the 26th annual Mini Medical School series possible. So a big thank you to Hamilton Center, Inc., Indiana State University, Indiana University School of Medicine, Terre Haute, Lugar Center for Rural Health, Minority Health Coalition of Vigo County, Inc., Terre Haute Regional Hospital, Tribune Star, Union Health, Via Media, West Central Indiana AHEC, and WTHI TV. Next, I'm just going to explain the logistics for tonight's event. Again, for those of you who are old pros now, you've heard this one before, but if you're joining us for the first time this evening, the Zoom webinar platform will allow us to feature our local expert panelists. All other attendees should be muted during this presentation, and we encourage you to submit your questions during the presentation using the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. Your questions will be answered by our panelists following a brief intermission after their presentation. Tonight's topic will focus on infant home safety. So our two panelists for this evening, the first is Dr. Jackie Holder. She's a pediatrician who's been practicing for 21 years, 19 of which she has spent in Terre Haute. She joined the APNS clinic in 2002 to work as a general pediatrician, as well as care for premature infants born at Union Hospital. Now she continues to take care of second-generation families, but has shifted into more of an administrative position as the medical director of Union Medical Group, made up of 150 multi-specialty providers in the Wabash Valley associated with Union Hospital. She completed her MBA at IU Kelley School of Business in 2020. Christina Keller joined our community in 2013 and serves as the West Central Indiana Healthy Start Coordinator. A prior California State University auditor, she graduated with a BS in kinesiology and obtained a healthcare administration master's from St. Mary of the Woods in 2017. Prior to her current role, Christina worked as a perinatal navigator, helping at-risk women have successful pregnancies and empower healthy family beginnings. Her passion revolves around helping families succeed. Prior to Union, Christina worked at the Vigo County Health Department as a health educator and served as a co-chair for the region's child fatality review team. So without further ado, Dr. Holder, Ms. Keller, please take it away.
There we go. All right, if I could unmute myself. Thank you and welcome everybody. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Zoe, and the opportunity to speak tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. We're both very excited. I've had the absolute pleasure to collaborate with Dr. Holder for the last 3 years, serving families and helping have successful pregnancies and healthy, like you mentioned, healthy, safe beginnings. Today, Dr. Holder and I will be discussing 6 different types of preventable child injuries with a focus on infants and young children. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to try to get through it, and we hope that you guys enjoy and have lots of questions. Many of you may have young grandchildren or children around you or with you, and I first wanted to thank you. Grandparents are a beautiful, incredible piece of our life, and your grandchildren are blessed to have you, so we wanted to thank you for that. And we will, as we walk through some tough subjects tonight, we do have a few goals to share. Let me make sure I can move forward on here. There we go. So we have a few goals to share, and we wanted to make sure that we give the ability to have confidence in caregiving. So for those who have kiddos around them, grandkids, children, maybe children that you are babysitting or watching, we wanted to make sure that you have full confidence in caregiving, knowledge of recommendation changes. So we will talk through some of the recommended changes that have happened over the last 20 years and make sure that we are talking about current information that you will be able to share with those around you, your loved ones, your friends and family, and of course the opportunities to participate. So if you find the subject very interesting, something you're very passionate about, we welcome more conversation around that, and we'll talk through a few different opportunities to participate in ongoing conversations and activities and community partnerships. So we will talk through all of those today, but these are our goals that we really wanted to make sure that we got to. So with those goals in mind, I will open up the floor to Dr. Holder to begin our presentation.
Thank you, Christina, and I would echo lots of thanks to all the sponsors. For in the time I've been here, this has been a great way to get current issues out for the our community to hear from experts. So we appreciate your interest and in all the topics through the mini med school. So again, thank you. So I'll start with a quote by C. Everett Koop, who Dr. Koop was, in my opinion, one of the greatest U.S. Surgeon Generals we had for pediatric initiatives. But he points out, kind of around our topic tonight of childhood injuries, that if disease were killing our children in the proportions that injuries are, people would be outraged and demand that this killer be stopped. And I think that we take for granted some of the little things that happen in a blink of an eye, and we will focus around our talk around a lot of those. So as far as injury goes, it is the #1 killer of US children in the United States. More than 9,000 children die each year from injuries, which is the equivalent to 150 school buses all loaded with children. That is a lot. However, injuries that result in death are only part of the tragic story. Every year, millions of children are injured and have to live with these injuries for a period of time. However, some of their injuries have lifelong effects. So the consequence of these fatal and non-fatal potential injuries to children have, both a physical and emotional cost, and not just around the child themselves, but all the others that are involved in the child's life, including grandparents. So let's talk about preventable injuries. A preventable injury is unintentional. It's not something that was done on purpose. It's something that can be avoided by taking steps to ensure that the child's environment is safe and that adult supervision is in place at all times. Children are more likely to get injured because they're rascals, but also because of their size, their growth, their stage of development, their inexperience coupled with confidence, and also their curiosity. So these are the types of preventable injuries that we will focus on tonight, and we'll go through each of these individually. So in a high level, the causes of non-fatal injuries in young children. Injuries due to falls were the leading cause of non-fatal injury in young children. Each year, almost 3 million children have had an initial emergency department visit subsequent to a fall. For children less than 1 year of age, falls account for over 15% of non-fatal injuries, and the others are listed as, being struck or insect and bee stings. So when we talk about the causes of fatal injuries in children, the #1 cause of injury-related death for children's ages 1 to 4 is drowning. Hands down. Leading cause of injury-related death for children under the age of 1, though, is unintended suffocation, mostly while sleeping, or accidental strangulation. Injury-related deaths are more likely to occur in boys, actually twice as likely as girls. So let's talk about choking injuries specifically. So choking rates are highest among infants at a rate of 140 per 100,000, and the risk does decrease with age. Almost 90% of fatal choking injuries occur in children younger than 4 years of age. So when we think about what's the risky objects, so objects that are less than 1.5 inches in diameter or 1 3/4 inches for small spherical objects are higher risk for choking. It's good to keep in mind that just because a toy is on the market does not guarantee its safety. The most common safety hazards for children are latex balloons. It is the leading cause of choking death, and there's reasons behind that. They're often around young children, and when they do get broken, they'll conform to the airway and create a seal that blocks breathing. Other objects, round or spherical objects, obviously, if they're small enough, they can fit snugly in the throat and then block the airway. Foods, we all kind of know the foods that we think about with children and choking, and they are some popular foods in their age group. So when we talk about high-risk foods, these are them. So hot dogs are the most common among fatal choking. Then there's nuts and seeds, whole grapes, raw carrots, popcorn, marshmallows, gum, peanut butter, sausages. So the list is of some of the most common foods that are in a child's diet. So how do we prevent choking? And these are common sense things. And as grandparents, you know this, but just to reiterate that we need to cut the food in smaller pieces. For the infants, we need them to be, 1/4 inch or smaller, very small pieces, or 1/2 inch or smaller for toddlers. For children with teeth, food selection, can be different. If the kiddo has molars, it's a good indication that the child will be able to chew harder foods. We should still avoid high-risk foods in children under 5, and that's the list that we talked about previously. And make sure that children are seated while eating. They love to wander around or sometimes play on the run. But we really need them to be sitting and learn that habit of sitting while they eat. You need to check all your toys that they have access to for small or loose pieces, and really keep an eye on magnets and batteries. And we'll kind of go into that a little bit more later in the presentation. So moving on to water injuries. The majority of infant drowning deaths occur in bathtubs or large buckets. The most common place for drownings of 1 to 4-year-olds is a swimming pool and smaller kiddie pools like the one on the slide there. So prevention, or what we want everybody to focus on, and passing that information on to younger folks that are perhaps even caring in the family for children. Always supervise children in and around water. There aren't very many summer checkups in children under the age of 3 that I don't always talk about, being the parent at the picnic between the water and you. I mean, you need to be always watching and make sure that what's the water source? Is there a potential? Because as soon as you take your eyes off them, that's exactly where they'll go. So make sure pools are fenced with at least a 4-foot high fence with a self-closing and self-latching gate. Always avoid distractions like our phones. Be aware of potential water hazards, even shallow water. Goldfish ponds, puddles are often the source of drowning in young children. Close the bathroom doors, close the toilet lids, and drain the tub when you're done. And never leave a child alone in a bathtub. So moving on to burn injuries. So how big of a problem are burns among children? The answer might really surprise you. Every hour, at least 16 children are injured from burns or fires, and more than 300 children are treated for burn injuries in the ER every day. 2 children die every day from burn injuries. That's a significant amount in our community as well. As you can see, the most common causes of burn injuries are hands down contact with fire and flame and scald injuries. The others, we do see hot objects, electrical, chemical, and others, but hands down, fire and scald are the main sources. So to talk about scald injuries, which are very common in the house, hot tap water is a very common source of scald injuries in young children. Scald burns happen with hot liquids or streams. So it's generally like you see, you know, when they're around even just the regular bathtub or the faucet. The time it takes for a 3rd degree or a really severe burn to occur, at a temperature of 149 degrees, it's 2 seconds. So like as soon as, you know, an instant, it can burn, and it happens in a blink of an eye. At 120 degrees, that time to a 3rd degree burn is 2 minutes. So this allows that extra time that you can remove the child from the hot water and to prevent a burn. Because of their thinner skin, children burn more quickly and over a larger area of their skin, causing a really significant burn. So in prevention, you can buy products for sinks that you can permanently install them. So, you know, as far as turning on the faucet, but oftentimes adjusting your hot water heater can help. So adjusting it to that 120 degrees. I like to point out you know, everybody has a cup of coffee, it seems like all the time, but it is a significant accident injury. So if it's a really hot cup of coffee that you're, you know, putting it down and not taking care of the kids at the same time, even with a lid, they're not 100% spill proof. So in the kitchen, everybody knows toddlers are curious. They can reach things that an adult may think that they're out of their reach. But even like children, you know, close to a year of age can reach about 8 to 10 inches up onto the countertop where the food's being prepared. So just remembering when you're cooking to turn the pot handles face towards the back of the stove and use generally the back burners if you can. So we're going to talk a little bit about sun exposure. I get a lot of questions about this in the office, so I just kind of want to review safety with kids and when people have questions about it. So skin cancer, even in our youngest population, is on a significant rise. Young children are more likely to get sunburn because their skin is not fully developed and it can be damaged even as early as the first summer of life. So those little ones, those babies that are coming outside this summer. So children shouldn't be outside, can't be outside obviously without being in the sun at some point, but they need to be protected from getting too much sun. So people who've had very bad sunburns when they were children are more likely to get skin cancer later in life. It's almost how many times have you been burned to the point of blistering? So we want to prevent that. The first step to prevent the chance of getting sunburn and skin cancer is to protect the children early in their life and teach them how to be safe in the sun. The amount of time children are out in the sun should be limited, especially between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. when the sun is the strongest. And these are just good rules of thumb. And shade play is not bad play. It's actually pretty good to prevent that, especially when they want to be out there all day. So biggest question I get is infants. So we tell parents that infants younger than 6 months should be kept out of direct sunlight, period. They should be under a tree, you know, in the stroller with the canopy or under an umbrella. Children under 6 months should also wear clothes that cover up and protect the skin from the sun and should wear bathing suits and swimming shirts during water play. When they're outside, infants should wear hats, and if a hat isn't available, should keep them in the shade or under an umbrella to avoid the sun. When we apply sunscreen, it sometimes gives us a false sense of security. Even infants that have sunscreen on younger than 6 months should still stay primarily out of direct sunlight. You should use enough sunscreen to cover all the exposed areas, especially the face, nose, ears, their hands and feet, even the backs of their knees, and you need to rub it in really well. You need to put it on about 15 to 20 minutes before going outside, and that's just to allow time for the medicine to absorb in the skin. Remember that even on cloudy days, because upwards of 80% of the UV rays can get through the clouds. So, UV rays bounce back from water and sand and snow and concrete. So you need to make sure that even though it doesn't seem like it's that a high risk of a situation, that you are putting it on. And then remember to put sunscreen on every couple hours, and after swimming or sweating or drying off with a towel because you're rubbing it off. Because most people use too little sunscreen, make sure to get a good amount on there and rub it in. So lots of information, sorry. So moving on to car injuries. So motor vehicle crashes are a leading cause of death and disability among children in the United States. More than 9,000 children ages 12 and younger have died in crashes in the past decade. And that would be the equivalent of about 450 classrooms full of children. 1 in 3 of the children who died in crashes were not buckled up. Using car seats, boosters, and belts. So safety restraints are effective in reducing death and injury when they're used properly, and using them every time. Misuse and non-use remain the leading factors in preventable motor vehicle deaths and injury. There are 4 phases of child passenger safety restraints. We have rear-facing car seats, forward-facing booster seats, and the seat belt. Excuse me. Every transition is a reduction in safety. Many parents report confusion about when to move from one phase to the next, and transitioning too soon can be catastrophic for a child in a crash. So we'll provide some resources at the end of this presentation to just go through some of those resources to use to know when. But I'm gonna, on the next slide, we're gonna talk about rear-facing car seats. And I really wanna emphasize this one. This one, I think, between the sunscreen and sometimes bud spray, the car seats has a lot of conversation in my office. So infants and toddlers should ride in a rear-facing car seat until they're age 2, or they reach the height weight limits of their seat based on information provided by the manufacturer. And that is a big shift over the last probably 5 years, is to have all children rear-facing until the age of 2. Children are 5 times safer when they ride rear-facing. Rear-facing seats give the best support to the neck and head and spine, and prevent the child's head from being thrown away from the body in the event of a crash. You think about it, we consider how careful we are in supporting the head and neck of an infant. That goes into play about that development phase. So infant and toddler heads are much larger than their necks. This puts tremendous stress on the immature and weak neck. The adult head is about 6% of the total body weight, or an infant, it's 25% of the body weight. So infants and toddlers are not small adults. Young children are especially at risk for head and spinal cord injuries because of their bones are not yet hardened and ligaments are still developing. Heat stroke is definitely an issue that we need to address. Babies and young children can sometimes sleep so peacefully that we forget they're even there. It can be tempting to leave the baby alone in the car while we, quickly run into the store. The problem is that leaving a child alone in a car can lead to a serious injury or death from heat stroke. Young children are particularly at risk because their bodies heat up 3 to 5 times faster than an adult's body, and these tragedies are completely preventable. Heat stroke is the leading cause of non-crash vehicle-related deaths for children. On average, every 8 days, a child dies from heat stroke in a vehicle. In 2014, 30 children ranging from age 1 month to 5 years died from heat stroke or suspected heat stroke while left in cars. Let's see. So moving on, to ingestions and poisonings. So developmentally, we kind of covered children are curious and they do not understand what things are dangerous. If anything, they think danger is their magnet. So 1 and 2-year-olds are explorers, and it's part of their natural development in this age to walk alone, stand on tiptoes, climb up on furniture without an adult, and turn over containers to pour out what's inside. These behaviors that are what put a child at risk if medicine is left within sight on a low counter or within reach. Medicine is weight-based, and the expression is 1 pill can kill in an adult the same size, that it's significant injury to children. So methods of poisoning ingestion is by far the most common. It's, when they eat or drink a substance, they're attracted to bright, colorful packages, pills, and odd shapes. They often mistake pills for vitamins, for candy. So poisonings by absorption, of course, happen when the substance like pesticides or plants come in contact with a person's skin or eyes, and then it's absorbed through the skin or mucous membrane. Inhalation happens, of course, when they're breathing the fumes from carbon monoxide, pesticides, certain types of art material or dust that contain lead. The air is exchanged in the lungs and becomes in direct contact with the bloodstream. And then animal insect bites, they cause an allergic reaction, but some can also be very toxic and lead to death. Some of the more severe insect injuries includes those from ticks, which cause Lyme disease or Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and reptiles like rattlesnakes and other beard snakes. Injection, I think we've seen a bit of an uptick of this more recently. Obviously, when there's a puncture wound, it can come from the substance that was injected or the threat of tetanus. Today, there's an extra threat of children finding needles that have been used to inject drugs. And then, of course, they are at risk for infectious diseases as well, like HIV and hepatitis B. Some of the most serious household poisons other than medicines include drain openers and toilet bowl cleaners that can cause chemical burns as serious as burns from fires, nail glue removers that can cause cyanide poisoning if swallowed, and windshield washer solutions that can cause blindness and death if swallowed. Carbon monoxide poisoning can happen from faulty furnaces or other heating appliances. And young children are especially at risk to the effects of carbon monoxide because of their smaller bodies. They process it differently than adults, and they can be more severely affected by it and show signs of poisoning sooner, which include headache and nausea and drowsiness. This one, I think if we were to take one slide and pass it to everybody, these are the most common worrisome things that our children come in contact with. So laundry packets, especially in our homes, they're brightly colored, they're perfect size, they look really good to eat. So we need to make sure that we keep all the laundry packets out of the children's reach and sight, and keep them in their original container and the container closed. There's been a big market push to have safety seals on those, so that there's less risk of that, but we just need to be really aware of it. Liquid nicotine, so vape products. In 2015 through July 31st, the American Association of Poison Control Centers received almost 2,000 e-cigarette device and liquid nicotine reported exposures. Some children and toddlers who come in contact with e-cigarette devices or liquid nicotine have become very ill, some even requiring ER visits because of the nausea and vomiting that it elicits. And adults should also use care to protect their skin when handling the products and make sure that they keep out of reach of children. My most feared is the button battery. We are seeing a big increase of those being in lots of devices and toys, and they're the perfect size for both choking, but then also ingestion. So coin lithium battery devices should be put out of sight and out of reach of children. Remote controls, singing greeting cards, digital scales, watches, hearing aids, thermometers, children's toys, calculators, key fobs, tea light candles, flashing holiday jewelry, decorations that contain button batteries. So keep them, if they're loose, keep them away. Put a piece of duct tape over the controller to prevent the child from accessing the battery. If a child ingests a lithium battery, they need to go to the hospital immediately. I know it sounds dramatic, but the amount of caustic irritation and erosion that a coin battery causes it can be life-changing. So I just really want, if there was one big message here, it's all safety, but those batteries, I tell you. Child safety caps. So child safety caps are designed to prevent or at least delay young children from opening bottles so that an adult can stop them before the bottles are opened. However, you have to always make sure that you're putting them back on so that they are effective afterwards. Use a child resistant cap for your medicine bottles if you can. If pill boxes or non-child resistant caps are the only option, store them in containers up high and out of sight and reach when caring for children. And keep in mind that child resistant does not mean child proof. And some children will still be able to get the bottles open with enough time and persistent, which we know that they're very persistent. So also make sure that you always put that cap back on. The best way to prevent children from finding medications is to make sure that they're all medications are not accessible to them. As you can see by this graphic, 20% of medications that children find are from someone's purse or bag. Remember that children are good climbers. We should always make sure that we're putting our purses and diaper bags and backpacks and other bags out of reach for children, and create a special place for, for the house to place their items, even when they're, you don't think that they can. Just always trying to make sure that even if it was just a blink of an eye, they can climb up into your bag. Supervision is the key to prevention of medication poisoning. So watch at all times when medication is being given to children. Don't turn your back when you're taking your medicine. And of course, like we said, make sure they're out of reach of all little hands. So what to do if there is a swallowing? If a poisonous substance is swallowed by a child, you need to call poison control first. That number hasn't changed, I don't think, in 30 years, but we'll have it at the end. But if you don't know it, it's 1-800-222-1222. Have the package of the substance or medicines close by so you can give specific information to poison control if that ever was to happen. Don't give the little one anything to eat or drink, or try to make the child throw up. If a poisonous substance gets in a child's eyes, you certainly should try to rinse them with running water and then call poison control. So I have gone through quite a lot of the preventable injuries, but Christina is going to take the next slide set from here. Let me shut this down. All right, are you ready, Christina?
Awesome. I am. Perfect, thank you guys. And I would suggest too, at this point, Dr. Holder talked through a lot of different preventable injuries. If anyone on this call has any questions, I suggest you put them down in the question and answer box. So when we do question and answer, we will be ready for your questions. So if you have any questions on anything Dr. Holder has gone through, feel free to drop them below. I will talk today about infant mortality. So this was on our list when we talked about suffocation on our 6 different preventable injuries at the beginning. Infant infant mortality, we wanted to cover kind of a whole section, and we really could do a whole talk on each one of these subjects that Dr. Holder has talked about, and this one as well. So we will try to get really as much information in as possible, and I do know that it is a ton of information. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them below, and we will be able to provide a lot of resources at the end that we will go through. Let me try to move this forward. Okay, so infant mortality facts and statistics. Infant mortality, to start with, is defined as the death of a baby before his or her first birthday. So incredibly upsetting and sad. It is a very high indicator of the health of the nation in general. So infant mortality, when you would hear statistics such as 7.7, means that if you said 7, it would be 7 out of 1,000 live births. So in Indiana, in 2018, we unfortunately lost 559 infants, and 14 of which occurred in our central southwestern hospital region, which is where we are here. Why? So why, we asked the question, why are our babies dying? There really are a multitude of reasons for infant deaths. Unfortunately, when they pass in the first year of life, some we spoke of earlier tonight being accidents, the infant death. A lot of what we see is low birth weight, preterm deliveries, babies who are born too early and are very small, congenital malformations, and a term you may have heard before that we will talk about today, which is SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome, or unsafe sleeping environments. So that is what we will mainly focus on for the sake of safety and for the sake of really bringing in the conversation with community members and people who have babies. So we can talk about this, like I said, for a long time, but really wanted to hone in on what is really plaguing our community here, which is unsafe sleep. We know that 16% of our infant mortalities have been deemed SIDS deaths, and so we really wanted to focus on the safe sleep factor today in our conversation. So we do know in infant mortality different ways that we can reduce it, including improving overall health for women in childbearing ages. So making sure that the women who are getting pregnant are healthy, our children and grandchildren are healthy women. We're promoting early and adequate prenatal care, so making sure that moms get into the doctor when they find out they're pregnant and versus later on. So I'm really trying to make sure that our women are accessing care in that first trimester. Decreasing early elective deliveries. So really decreasing deliveries before 39 weeks to make sure that we have full-term healthy babies. A lot of development happens in the last couple weeks, and we really want to make sure that we keep our babies safe and healthy as long as we can. A huge one is really decreasing our prenatal smoking and substance use. We have a very high number of women who smoke during pregnancy and also after delivery, as well as substance use disorder, and whether that is tobacco, like we've talked about, or illicit drugs. Decreasing those numbers really helps improve our infant mortality rate. Increasing breastfeeding duration and exclusivity, we'll talk about that a little bit, but it really is the #1 focus in terms of reducing our SIDS rates. And supporting birth, spacing, and interconception wellness. So we do know that moms, in order to have the healthiest recovery and well-being for the future pregnancies, that there should be a minimum of 18 months spacing between pregnancies. And what, again, we will talk about and focus on today is promoting what we call the ABCs of safe sleep. So placing baby to sleep alone, on his or her back, and in a crib. So our program did a focus group in 2019 with team members and families around safe sleep. Some of the key findings from that study were that all the participants knew of the ABCs that we just talked about, alone, back, in a crib, and they were aware of the risks, but they were not following the guidelines. So why is that happening? A lot of the answers we got were they know what is best for infants, the feeling of it won't happen to me, it doesn't happen that often, felt safer with their infant sleeping with them, felt more comfortable, felt that it was their natural instinct, and they're a light sleeper and they'll wake up. and very convenient, rightfully so. I'm a mother of 3 children. It very tired in the first couple weeks and months, and so we really want to work on ways that we can help moms prepare for that time and know what to do in order to increase safe sleep. Part of the study part of what we got from the study is what would make moms change their beliefs, or families change their beliefs and their actions. So hearing from first-hand accounts of moms and families who have lost an infant due to unsafe sleep, trust of the information, so where the information is coming from, that it's not scary, that it's not fear tactics into making them make a behavior change. And what we really wanted to focus on here is voices of authority. So not only were doctors and nurses and caregivers listed in that, but family members, caregivers in terms of daycare providers, and other moms were really highly listed on people they would listen to. So we want to make sure that we can do as much education as we want in that prenatal period, but making sure that we also get the education to those who are around our moms. Making sure that education is given during early pregnancy and pregnancy, and making that information readily and easily accessible. So having safe sleep classes, low cost crib access or pack and play access, and making sure that we are asking moms if they know what safe sleep is, and if they don't, educating and helping be able to access that information. So we will talk about what was the last on the list of 6 was suffocation or unsafe sleep. So we'll talk about safe sleep here. Safe sleep may be a new term to some of you. It may be a term you're very comfortable with. When we talk about safe sleep, a lot of times it's like, what is safe sleep? It's a term that is very comfortable to us, but we want to make sure that we talk through actually what safe sleep is. So with ongoing research, recommendations for safe sleep have changed over the years. And we talked about that before in terms of generational changes, and a lot of information with new research changes as we go along. Research has really found that if infants are sleep on their stomach, the risk of dying from SIDS increased by at least 2-fold, which is huge. So with that information, back in 1994, the Back to Sleep campaign was initiated. And we have been telling parents and new mothers and families to place their babies on their back in order to create a safe sleep environment. So this photo illustrates a safe sleep environment for babies, which reduces the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, as we talked about, and other sleep-related causes of death are low when a baby's environment looks similar to the one in the picture. The picture demonstrates the baby sleeping on his back on a firm, flat surface. Making sure that there is a crib sheet a fitted crib sheet on the mattress. We want to make sure that that is on there so it doesn't create a barrier between the plastic and baby. So making sure the baby is on their back. They're dressed in sleep clothing. So you can see baby here is in a onesie. We talk a lot about swaddling in a swaddle that is given by the hospital, or a safe sleep swaddle that allows baby to stay warm but without using a blanket. So wearable, those the onesies that you see here, anything that would not be able to come loose in baby's movement. So baby's dressed in safe sleep clothing. There are no, you can see in this picture, and we hear this a lot, it looks so bare, and that's a good thing. So we want to make sure that our cribs look just like this. So we do not want any crib bumpers, any pillows, blankets, loose bedding, or toys in the sleep area. Just their crib sheet, and their safe sleep environment is the best way to put baby down. So when we talk about when they ask for advice, what you can do to help, we wanted to talk through a couple of the most common questions that come up when we talk about safe sleep. The first one being, if I put my baby on their back, won't they be more likely to choke? So infants a lot of times vomit or spit up after they've eaten or when they're sleeping. And that is a very common question as well. If they're on their back, wouldn't that be more likely that they would choke? The answer to that is no. So you can see here in this picture that when baby's on their back, anything coming up from their stomach, so any spit up or vomit will be forced by gravity to the lowest point. So here with baby on the back, You can see that their lowest point is their esophagus, not their trachea. So the trachea would be the tube down to the lungs, causing inhalation, anything that they spit up. So placing baby on their back in a back sleeping position is really the best option for that situation. The second most often question is, I was put on my stomach as a baby and I turned out this fine, so is that a big deal? And this is kind of where we talk about the generational changes and what we talked about in terms of the numbers of infants that we saw dying. So back in 1994, when the study occurred in terms of changing from side and belly to back, we had over 4,000 babies a year in the United States dying from unsafe sleep situation. So things have changed a lot, and even in that subtle reduction of moving baby in one position, which is where we're asking to be on their back, we have really decreased infant mortality by half just from that change. So we really want to make sure that we are sticking with baby on their back as it carries the lowest risk of SIDS. And really, everyone is following the evidence that was given at the time. So it's not a judgment feeling of I was doing the wrong thing. That was what we had. That was the best information at that time. So now that new research has come out, we wanted to make sure that we shared the information. So when my baby can roll, this is another common question. So when my baby can roll on their own, can they sleep in any position that they want? So really making sure that goes back to making sure that their environment is clean and free of all blankets, pillows, has all the things that we listed, all the things that are still commonly marketed. They're cute. Everyone especially wants their bed and their nursery to look really sweet and comfy. But we really want to make sure that we do not have any of those in the crib to start with. Once baby can learn to roll, we still want to always initially place baby on their back, especially right at the beginning when they're starting to learn how to roll. They're really not strong enough. We always, for that first year of life, recommend placing baby on back. And as they get stronger, they'll be able to roll back and forth, but we wanted to give them the initial setup of baby on their back. And we do know that while SIDS rates decrease by 6 months when most babies learn how to roll, it doesn't go away completely until around 12 months of age. So again, back to feeling comfy, feeling warm. Why can't babies have blankets, and what about hats? We truly always consider those a hazard, so blankets and other soft items, even a hat that can come off, are hazardous to baby's sleep. Using sleepers like the baby in this picture is wearing a onesie or a sleep sack. They're often called wearable blankets or sleep sacks, are much safer. And making sure the temperature is right. So a lot of times, really any clothing that you are comfortable in, baby typically is too, and making sure the temperature in your home is comfortable. So around 68 degrees, making sure that baby is cool. It is better for baby to be cooler than warmer. They can sleep a lot harder when the weather is warm or when the room is warm. So making sure that baby is comfortable in the clothing that they're wearing without having any additional blankets. So what is wrong with letting baby sleep in a bouncer or a car seat? This comes up a lot. We really always want to avoid having baby, taking baby out of the car and letting them sleep in their car seat. Puts baby in a position, as you can see in this picture, that is at risk for slipping into a position that can block their airway. So this baby really is in an uncomfortable position, and he looks pretty comfy as he's asleep, but it's a very uncomfortable or very dangerous position where the airway is blocked off by the position of the baby. So we want to avoid letting babies sleep in infant carriers and infant car seats. They don't have, especially this young of a baby, does not have the strength to move their head in positions that will open up their airway, allow them to unblock their airway if it's blocked. So we want to avoid having babies sleep in car seats. In addition, making sure that we've had a few babies in our actual region here who have unfortunately passed away being in a car seat, an environment where they were tipped over and did not allow for proper air. can I put the baby to sleep on their side? So this just goes back to everything we're mentioning in terms of putting baby to sleep on their back first. There is a 2 to 3% risk higher of this if the baby is put to sleep on their tummy or side. That side sleepers very easily fall right over onto their belly. So we want to make sure that we're always putting baby flat on their back. We will go through there. So we have here when a baby sleeps on their back and gets placed to sleep on their tummy, they're 18% more likely to die from fibs. This is not true if they're changed from tummy sleeper to back sleeper. So really emphasizing putting baby to sleep on their back at the beginning of the evening or for nap. A lot of people ask about flat heads, making sure that flat heads are really common in babies, and they typically end up going away on their own once they start sitting up and moving around. This is where the conversation of tummy time really has increased in the last couple of years, and making sure that babies are placed on their tummy to help strengthen their neck and their back and their core, and to avoid those flat spots on heads. So really the time spent sleeping in their crib on their back typically doesn't last too long, and it's much more important to make sure baby's in a safe environment than to worry about the hair loss or the little bit of flathead that may occur with back sleeping. So this is a really important conversation. This talks about the difference between co-sleeping, bed sharing, and room sharing. You may hear all of these things. They can be quite confusing. So we wanted to walk through them. You can see in the picture here with the green check mark where mom and dad are sleeping and baby is in their room. So what we would consider surface sharing is when a parent or caregiver shares a bed, couch, or any sleep surface with baby. That could be the ground, that could be a pull-out mattress. This is what we want to avoid this. Room sharing is what you see in the picture, where baby sleeps in their own crib, bassinet, safe sleep environment, in the same room where the parent sleeps. So we highly encourage, and the AAP highly encourages room sharing to make sure that you can respond to baby, you can hear baby. The SIDS rates are dramatically different in parents who room share with their kiddos. And co-sleeping includes both surface sharing and room sharing. So that would be in a situation where parents were sleeping with their children next to them. We want to avoid surface sleep sharing and co-sleeping and make sure that we do encourage room sharing when possible. This is another picture that describes a safe sleep environment. It shows baby, you can see in the bed with a crib sheet, nothing else. He is room sharing with his mother in this picture where she is able to respond to him. She's still able to easily, for example, breastfeed him and put him right back to sleep in a safe sleep environment. And this also includes other suggestions such as avoiding smoking around your baby and those kinds of suggestions. I'm watching the time to make sure we don't keep you guys for too long. So one of the when we talk about the #1 protective factor against this is really making sure that we're supporting our breastfeeding mothers. So breastfeeding is the #1 protective factor against this. Highly important to make sure that we're encouraging our children, our grandchildren, our friends, family to breastfeed as long as possible and get the support they need. So very quickly, as I was introduced in terms of West Central Indiana Healthy Start, what is part of our All Babies initiative. So we are here currently working in this community as a perinatal navigation program. So we do have our program. This is actually one of our graduates from our program who's proudly the new owner of one of her car seats and some goodies for her kiddo there in celebration of him making it past 12 months and celebrating his first birthday. We are a home visiting program. We share an evidence-based curriculum that with a lot of other community partners to make sure that everyone in our community is getting the same information. Supporting families holistically, making sure that we are supporting all the things we talked about in terms of early prenatal care, consistent prenatal care, and making sure that needs are met. working on community impact that we will talk about briefly, and different policy changes. So in talking through ways of being engaged, we wanted to not only give information tonight, but make sure that if this was a subject, not just infant mortality, but really infant and child safety, if this is a subject you are passionate about, you have interest in, you have more questions in, we always highly encourage you to communicate with us as well. We'd love to have you. We do have Community Action Network meetings, so what we call our CAN meetings. I listed our next one here and some information that we'll talk through in the last slide of different ways that you can get a hold of us. You can join our meetings. We'd love to hear and have you as part of our team. And to share today's information. So when you leave today, to share even just a tiny little bit with whoever you see, whether that is moms of small children or friends and family who care for them, prevention starts with all of us. So here are some of the resources that Dr. Holder and I talked through today. I think we'll have to add, actually, now that you mentioned the poison control number, we didn't add on here. So we'll have to add that down in the comment box. But here are some of the resources we talked through. These are more national resources, larger resources that have incredible information, different information on injury prevention and safe sleep. And we will make these slides available for you guys to keep as well. And here are some of the local resources that we talked about today. You can see our All Babies initiative on the right, different ways to get a hold of us, different ways to join, make an impact in that sense. We talked a lot about car seat safety. We do have our local Chances and Services for Youth, or CASE, who has car seat installation clinics and would love to work with anyone who has concerns about that, making sure that anytime children ride in your own vehicle that they are secured and safely. And of course, Indiana 2-in-1 to help get connected with any other resources, questions you might have. So I will leave it with this beautiful picture, making sure that we are talking about prevention and how much better it is than cure. We live in a beautiful world of medical knowledge that cure is extremely helpful, and not to ever put that down, but really making sure that we can do our part in prevention. It is not just us here speaking, but we want to make sure that everyone who are around our kiddos and our infants, that we are doing our best at keeping them safe and loved. Thank you guys so much for coming today.
Wow, thank you. That was such a wonderful presentation. I learned so much from both of you. So at this time, we are going to take a brief 5-minute intermission. During the break, a pop-up window is going to appear on your screen. This is just to collect some basic audience information. So we ask you to just please complete this poll by making your selections and clicking submit. We're going to have a Q&A session after the intermission. So just a reminder that mini med school attendees can type questions throughout the session using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. I see we also have a couple in the chat box. I'll go ahead and flip back and forth between both. So if you drop them in either place, I'll make sure to address them here after the break. Just fill out that survey. I guess we'll see everyone back at 7:35. Me and Stanley will enjoy it. All right, so that's 5 minutes by my count. So we'll wait for, oh my gosh, you guys popping right up. So we're just gonna jump right into the Q&A session, and I'm not seeing anything in our Q&A window, but I believe we have a couple here in the chat. So the first one is, should I be concerned about living in an older home and possible lead-based paint exposure?
So I'll field that one. So in 1978, the federal government banned lead-based paints for homes. Some states it was earlier than 1978. So if your home is older than that, then you have a couple of options. You can actually buy a lead paint test kit. And I usually sell them at hardware stores, and it's like a chemical reaction. And then the way to remedy that, really kind of depends on what type and where it's at, but oftentimes taking paint off makes more flaking, and then it's harder because it gets in the carpet and floors and everywhere else. So there are paints that can be used to paint over them. So one good thing along that line, standard care for young ones, because of the fact that we still live in environments where obviously homes are older than 1978, that routinely children are tested for lead levels at age 1 and 2, because everything goes in their mouth. So just about everything. So we test for it routinely. Oftentimes, parents don't know initially where the exposure is, so the health department collaborates, and we try to find where the sources are. When I first started practicing medicine, back when we rode dinosaurs, we didn't worry unless the lead level was over 10. And nowadays, even the smallest levels of lead are significant. So we just don't know exactly what the, where the safe level is. So, and since it can cause, long-term cognitive deficits, lead exposure and lead poisoning, most levels over the level of 5 are traced down. So there's a lot more than you wanted, but it's definitely less of a problem as time goes on, but it's still an issue to bring up.
Oh no, that answer was perfect, and great to know it's a little bit less of a worry now.
Yeah, I'll echo on that too. What we saw in my time before this position at the health department was an increase with the increase of families redoing old furniture pieces has become a big issue in lead-based paint, and taking vintage furniture or coffee tables and those kind of things for kids that would touch a lot, and redoing them, lead-based window designs on different things. So the redoing of furniture has been a large increase in what they've seen recently. But definitely, like Dr. Holder has mentioned, the increased testing and collaboration with health departments and home visitation has really helped narrow some of those items down.
Say, I've learned something new all the time. Wow, I had no idea. All right, our next question is also in the chat. We have, how can I, as a dad, help my wife in the middle of the night to practice safe sleep when she is strictly breastfeeding?
That's a good question. Really, and this sounds very cliche, but just being very supportive, making sure, I would say the single most helpful part of that in terms of the end of the question and safe sleep is making sure that you are assisting moms. A lot of times with breastfeeding, and it's breastfeeding, especially with an infant that's up every 1, 2, 3 hours, very exhausting, and a lot of times the unsafe sleep situation happens on accident during that time. If mom is tired, too tired to take baby back to his or her bed. So really, I would say what would be most helpful for a dad in that role or a partner in that role is to make sure that you can help get up and bring baby to mom, and more importantly, make sure that baby is returned to that safe sleep environment. So making sure that when mom is done feeding baby, the baby ends up in his or her own sleeping environment. So that may be just putting them down if they're asleep or helping settle them down to go back to sleep, I would say would be the biggest suggestion. Room sharing very much helps with that. So making, it's very helpful when baby is in a safe sleep environment in their own crib next to the mom and dad's bed or in the same room. So it makes it a lot harder when you're nice and warm and comfy and tired in bed to get out of bed and bring a baby all the way down the hallway in your home and place them somewhere else. So the incentive to stay in bed with baby is higher because of that exhaustion. So making sure the importance of room sharing is there, that baby is close and easy access to make sure that he or her returns to his safe sleep environment.
Yeah, I think all of us have been exhausted. Yeah. So that's the hardest thing is you don't think you're going to do it. And I would share that as a pediatrician for over 20 years, I have seen the devastation on families' faces when I mean, on the faces on their lives when an unforeseen tragedy takes place in so quickly. And all the instances that we described, I've seen catastrophic in every one of those categories. But this is a very key area to focus on, not just our community, but nationally. And, kudos to Christina and her group with Healthy Start by bringing those resources to the families and spreading the communication amongst the community. That, we've seen a decline in the unnecessary instances where babies don't reach their first birthday. So I think as a dad, supporting the breastfeeding, really kind of, talking the facts to not just your family, but your friends. It's a big deal, and we all are part of it. As I say, prevention is better than a cure, but we all have to know what we're preventing and how we can do our part. So part of our presentation today was just to bring to light some of the simple things that we forget or take advantage of in those situations. So.
All right, I'm so sorry, by the way. It sounds like there's some yard work happening here outside my window now. But hey, just another Tuesday night, right? Those are actually the only 2 questions that I have in the chat. I'll give a couple more seconds here. If anyone has any last minute questions they want to drop in the Q&A, drop in the chat. Other than that, Dr. Holder, Ms. Keller, thank you so much for being here tonight. Now, if there was one message, one takeaway, somebody is going to get lunch tomorrow, they're on a phone with somebody and they say, hey, I went to this mini med school about infant safety and you'll never guess what I learned. What would you hope that takeaway was?
I'll go first. In the briefest way, I think a mixture of both topics would be supervision, and to make sure that we're loving them enough. We love them so much, and to make sure that we're taking that and using prevention and this knowledge to the fullest. So making sure that we are being fully present in the moment with our kiddos in every sense of the word.
I suppose I think that, oops, sorry, I'm echoing. I agree 100%. I think the purpose of this was unintentional injuries. These are not planned, but there are ways around it. And number 2 is they're wily, no matter what you think. If you think they're not going to do it, they're going to do it. I mean, they excel at getting into stuff. So don't ever turn your back on them. We love them. They can be busy. So just, it's our job, protect those little ones from things that we know if we took a couple extra seconds to think about it and maybe making a different plan. So again, to the parents, grandparents, spouses, children, significant others, we all love them. And so we just need to take that extra second to go, where can they get into, and try to avoid it. So.
Great answers all around. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I guess this will conclude this year's mini medical school. Thank you once again, Dr. Holder and Ms. Keller, for taking the time to share with us. Thank you to the attendees for joining us and for sharing your questions. And we hope that you'll join us again for the next mini med school series in this next year. But as a final reminder, if you've missed any of the sessions in this series, the recording should be posted on the website under the date for the talk. So that should be any of the recordings from the mini med school series from this year. And when this meeting ends, a survey is going to pop up with some basic questions. It's different from the survey that you took at the intermission, but your feedback is anonymous and it will be used for planning future mini medical school sessions. So you can have more of these just great informative talks with great local experts. And thank you once again for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy the nice weather.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.